So, everyone, I have a very, very special guest here with us today. I have Dr. Nadine Macaluso. And why don't you go ahead and start, Dr. Nay, with introducing who you are and tell us a
Sure.
little bit
Well,
about where you're from and kind of all of those things.
yeah. Well, first of all, I am so impressed that you said my last name right without even asking me.
It's the Italian thing, I think.
That's what it is. It's the Italian thing. Okay. Yeah. So my patients call me Dr. Nay, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I also have my doctorate in somatic psychotherapy, which is really just a fancy way to say that I bring the body also into the therapy room. And my story is one for the movies, as they say. Um, I was grew up in Brooklyn with a single mother in the 70s. Very, very charmed life, very fun upbringing, very calm, cool, and easy. But it was raised by a single mom, and she didn't have a lot of financial resources. So I became a model to support myself
Okay.
because from 17 on, I was responsible for myself. And so I was modeling and living in the city in the 80s, which was tons of fun.
Oh gosh, New York City in the 80s, I'm envious of you.
There was nothing better.
Yeah.
Nothing better. And so, as my ex husband is the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, and as the movie depicts, I went to a party at his house, and little did I know that stepping into that house sealed my fate.
Yeah. In so many ways, though, right? Um, I think that, I have your book and we can talk about that too. I've been on the waiting list for this for so long and like see all the notes and everything. Um, you know, from what you experienced then, and we'll get into that, to where you're at now, do you feel like everything was necessary?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wish I could say I like had some grand plan.
Hmm.
And then I offer that to your listeners, if you're feeling lost or confused right now, just surrender into the process of life. It has a way of working out. Yeah, because if I hadn't gone through the quintessential trauma bond, I don't know that I would have had the true impetus and drive to write that book.
Right.
Aside from the fact I'm a clinician and I work with women who were trauma bonded, which they were also a big part of inspiring me to write it. But I think going through that, having a movie made about it, is a very unique situation that then allowed me to, like, the book to come through me in a very different way.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the movie a little bit. Remind me, what was the year that it came out?
So the movie came out in 2013. So it was just 10 years old in
Okay.
2023. Yeah.
Okay. And is that coincidental that I feel like like last summer was when I first started seeing a lot more of your presence online? I was like, how come I've never like bumped into her on social media, so to say, just because I am such a fangirl, and I'm like, this is crazy. I never knew this part of the story, which
Right.
is it was insane to me, but also at the same time, knowing Hollywood and all of these things, dramatizations. Um, can you tell us a little bit about what that was like to know that your life was going to be portrayed in a movie? Um, and then also you're going through, well, I guess tell us when your relationship ended with your ex-husband, and then how long in between was the movie made and the
Sure,
relationship
yeah,
ended?
I'll go through that process. So, yeah. So I left him, let's think about this, 1999, I think.
Okay.
And also I had been with him for about 8 to 9 years. And so I finally did leave him because we had a he was very emotionally abusive at one point, physically abusive, and he was a severe drug addict, as the movie depicts, right? This is not a mystery. I'm
Mm.
not saying anything that he doesn't know or that people don't know. And so finally, when he got arrested, he got an ankle bracelet. And I always say his ankle bracelet, locking him down, was my freedom because I knew I was safe. I knew he couldn't hurt me because he was very rich and powerful. And I was very afraid that if I left him, what he would try to do, take my kids, what he would say about me, even if it wasn't true. So once he got arrested, it was so obvious he was criminal, I was not, and I
Right.
was safe to leave. And so I left and I moved my children across the country to California because I wanted us to have a fresh start on life. And we really did. But he did follow us out there because he is a very good dad. And right when he went into jail, because he didn't get sentenced till 5 or 6 years later, or I don't know exactly how long later, he went to jail. He wrote the book, The Wolf of Wall Street. And that was around the same time I went back to get my master's in counseling. And then just as I was finishing up my PhD, the movie came out. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so, at first when he wrote the book, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to kill you. I had all my emotions around it. I, flailed about. And then finally my husband's like, okay, you got to get up now. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And so then life went on. And then when the movie was going to come out, I was like, you've got to be kidding me that my life that was a Greek tragedy is now for entertainment.
Right.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
that
so that was very challenging.
and I mean it's did Martin Scorsese produce it?
Yes, he's the
Yeah.
director. Yep.
Yeah, the director, I'm sorry. It's one thing to have somebody say, I'm going to take my book and turn it into a movie. It's another thing to say that Scorsese is making a movie about
Right.
your
Right.
life. Like
Right.
you're kind of like, okay, I don't know what to expect, but I kind of know the level of which this is going to be,
That's
I
right.
guess.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yes. Very correct. And so I had a lot of feelings about it. I did a lot of therapy over it. And then at one point I just said, Nadine, you have to surrender. Like this is bigger than you. And I did. I did. I just let it go. And I was like, okay, there's nothing I can do. I surrender.
So, I guess what involvement did you have in I guess like sharing your story and the truth, your truth within the storyline?
No, no, I had none because they wrote it. It was his book. So it's his narrative, his perspective. And really, it is his story. I am a character on the side. Margo Robbie plays me. And, you know, when you look at the movie, I just look like a young girl who fell madly in love and loved her kids, wanted to protect her kids and left, right? So I
Right.
was fine with the way that they portrayed me. Did it show the depth of my character? Of course not. But, I did meet Margot. She was only 22 at the time, and we met in New York City so they could tape me to get my accent,
Oh,
which she did a
wow.
great job on the accent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So,
Brooklyn accent is like no other. It's actually, I've been meeting people through this whole, sharing experience. I feel like most of the people that I'm meeting are from the Bronx, from Brooklyn. Like so many people from New York that I would have never run into. And I'm like, y'all are great. Because, being from Chicago, we have a totally different kind of twang thing going on, but I appreciate it so
so
much.
yeah, and it's a pretty strong accent. And so I met her, and we had a great rapport. And I shared this story on my social media where we took her to dinner, and she was very afraid of getting naked. And but she said, I can't go talk to them. I can't talk to Martin Scorsese. I can't talk to Leo. And I said, right there, that feeling of not being able to speak your truth to power, that's what I felt every single day. So I would
Yes.
keep that in mind as you play me.
Wow. How profound of a moment to really get her to like
Yeah.
method acting. You don't even have to
Yeah.
because you're experiencing it now.
Right. She's experiencing it. And I said, yeah, I get how you feel. It sucks.
Yeah. So was so like I mentioned before, you said 2023, so was the 10 years. So at 10 years, is that when you decided like, okay, I'm going to, share my side, or was that something that was like stipulated per contract kind of thing?
No, no, there was, I wish I could say there was some grand plan, but what had happened was that when the movie came out, all the press would come and want to talk to me. And honestly, I really had nothing to say,
Hmm.
and so I'm not going to talk just to talk. And so then what happened was, first of all, I wanted to make sure my kids were okay. And they were. My daughter's 30. She's a therapist. My son's 29. He's 28. He's a musician. And they were okay. And so what had happened was that as I was in my practice, all these smart, kind, beautiful women were coming in trauma bonded. And they were coming in with being, experiencing coercion from their husband and betrayal and abuse and financial abuse. And I just thought, we have a problem. So I decided to go back and write my book and go back to the research. And then I thought, you know what? I have this movie to use as a vehicle for my message. Now's the time. I'm going to use it. To,
Totally.
and that's really how it happened.
That's because you're highly intelligent to take, what some people would see as, a devastating blow, or, they don't, especially people who don't like the public eye, they're very private, things like that. Having a movie made about you could be very devastating. So to be able
Yeah.
to take those lemons and turn them into lemonade is inspiring. I think that there are a lot of people who don't get past the, oh man, this is a blow, and see the good in it when there's so much opportunity in so many different areas like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can understand that, but I think it's also a process of like trusting your intuition. And like when the movie came out, it wasn't a right time for me to talk. I had nothing to say. And then once I had a lot to say, I'm like, okay, now I have something to say. Right. And it's authentic and it's truthful. And there's a mission behind it, educating women about trauma bonds and pathological lovers and themselves so that they can feel, become empowered to not to endure these tragic relationships over and over again.
Absolutely. And one of the themes I've gathered from your book and just your overall content and message is really identifying yourself and
Yeah.
what it is in you, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, to understand why you're, the perfect target, or why you
Yeah.
feel, you know, I always had, through this process for me, I'm not sure how much you know about my story, but there's bits and pieces. It's just a very long, detailed, kind of like yours,
Okay.
like you couldn't get it in an hour. But um, I had a really hard time admitting that I was a victim. And it was when I finally like said that out loud with my therapist. It wasn't a negative thing for me. It was me being the victim organically made him then the predator. And I
That's
could never see that when I was in that.
yeah. Well, it's
And
very hard to think that somebody that you love and that has promised you love is perpetrating harm to you, right? So
yeah,
it's a mind bending thing to have to see.
definitely. And one of the topics that we talk about all the time, I just had Vanessa Reiser on here, and we were talking about that. That was, I actually found her off of your page. It was like, you
Yeah,
like Dr. Nay, you're gonna
we're
love
very good
Vanessa.
friends.
That's your, oh my God, she's so fantastic, and just the way that her canter, the way she speaks, is very much like mine. And so I we had the best dialogue. So like, when you realize that the person that you're with is, you know, a predator of some sense, I had a really hard time even after that, kind of like self-deciphering whether or not it was intentional, or if it was like a problem, like that he, kind of to make a comparison, like an addiction, right? Like, does this person have a disease, like a mental illness, that I should feel empathy or sympathy for them? Or is this very, very intentional and calculated, and they're very smart? One takes away the accountability, one it gives it all to them.
Right.
Did you experience that like in your scenario?
Well, yeah, because first of all, I didn't, it was so long ago and nobody was talking about narcissism and trauma bonds. Nobody was talking about this. So I was really in the dark.
Hmm.
And my ex had a big substance addiction issue, right? So even though he had a lot of the qualities of a pathological lover, um, we were very focused on his addiction, even though he had the rage and the coercive control and the manipulation and the betrayal and all of that. The
Hmm.
addiction was forefront. So I was very focused on that. And I always believed that my love could fix him. If I could just do this better, if I could just do that better. And I'm highly empathetic like you. And so I knew I was getting abused, but the addiction was forefront. But now
Hmm.
what I've discovered is that addiction doesn't make somebody an abuser.
Right.
It just exacerbates it. But my empathy certainly, which is a beautiful trait that I have, which makes me a great therapist, got weaponized against me.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I actually have like right here bookmarked in your book was that they know that about you because they ask all of the right questions up front.
Yes. Yes. So I do think it's intentional because I think that the love bombing, um, generous, kind, helpful side that we initially see is intentional to lure us in, to get us hooked, to get us to fall in love. I don't go into any relationship with the intention to control and manipulate anybody. I just
Right.
go in to connect, right? But they go in with the intention to get their needs met for money, power, pleasure, and status, no
Hmm.
matter what.
How
And
can
so,
this person serve me? Is the question
exactly.
that they ask themselves.
That's what they do. They just want to get their needs met and they will exploit, harm, use, and betray anybody and everybody. Um, and so then what happens is that it is intentional. They love bomb you, they get you hooked, then the mask falls, and the cold, cruel, controlling, abusive, betraying side comes out.
I find it terribly interesting that types of people like our ex-husbands uh
Yeah.
that they don't see they see the value, right, in their next victim, right? They're asking all the questions. What can I get from her? Oh, she has a law degree, she's beautiful, whatever it is. How do they not see that their actions are like the main cause of the downfall of some of those really great traits? I mean, because I know for me, at the end when I wasn't financially stable because he had gambled it all away or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
That was what he loved me for in the beginning, and then he took it away, and now he hates me because I'm not, and it's all my fault. Like, how do they
Yeah.
not see that they're doing that?
Well, because they're delusional and they believe their own lies and they have to create a narrative that really serves them, right? So
Hmm.
if they actually, first of all, they're not self reflective like you and I. You
Yeah.
and I can reflect and say, you know what? I hurt that person. Maybe I should have said that differently. Let me pick up the phone and call them. They have no capacity for self reflection. So it's about a need, a drive. What do they want? I want to gamble. I'm going to spend all her money up. Now she doesn't have it. She's useless to me. It's her fault. And remember, they are the ultimate victim. They victim signal, like I write about
Yeah.
in my book, right?
Hmm.
And so they're always victim signaling and blaming others
Yeah.
and never taking accountability.
That's one thing that across the board with all of the victims is when I'm having interviews with the girls, I'll look at her and I'll say, "You were a horrible person in his story." And she
Yeah,
was like, "You were a horrible person in his story." So it's just
yeah,
every single person, the narrative is that they did something wrong. They were the victim in some capacity. You should feel
that's right.
bad. And I think it's two-pronged, the intention on that. One, I think it's so that you feel empathy or sympathy for,
Yeah,
your
yeah,
new
yeah,
love, but also too, to kind of like ensure that I wouldn't or you wouldn't reach out, right? Because now I believe what you've told me because I love you, and so I would never reach out to them to get the truth because I know the truth.
Hmm. Yeah. I
And,
mean, what do you mean? Like we wouldn't reach out?
yeah, so I feel like when you're with a partner, um, my ex-husband, for example, right? He has a lot of exes, his ex-wife, ex-fiancés. Every single one of them was the worst person that you could ever possibly imagine.
Right, right, right.
And he made me believe that. And I believe that his intention with that was, I'm the victim, but then also like because I believed him and I trusted him, then there was no possible way that I was ever going to reach out to them to get the real
Check the
story.
story. Correct, correct. Because they make, because in their mind, when you have a personality disorder, it's black and white.
Yeah,
So you're good, you're all good or you're all bad. So now the X is in the all bad category, right? And so they convince you that they're all bad. So why are you going to reach out to an all bad person? Yeah,
totally.
prong. It could be two prong for sure.
Yeah, it seems so complex, but also it's so simple at the same time. But it's simple now because I'm out of it, I think.
Yeah.
Now that I can pick it apart, it's funny, like right before on Thursdays at 10 o'clock, I have my weekly therapy session. I've been going to the same therapist for I think it's close to 11 years. So she knows
Oh,
me through and through.
yeah.
And, you know, every single time I feel like it's now it's kind of just a conversation and we're doing maintenance and things like that. But today I had like this moment where I was like, "Oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way." Like there's these moments where I'm like I'm reflecting on those things. Kind of the what I said initially when I started talking was about me being the victim made him the predator, and that was kind of like key for me getting over. That was a today realization in therapy
Yeah.
after all
Yeah.
this.
And that's the thing, right? Is that, that's why this sort of trauma bond or relational trauma, it's it's chronic relational trauma causes us to have confusion, right? And to have a lot of complex PTSD symptoms, which just take time to heal. And when you're in it, you're truly in a fog, right? Because I learned about the concept of cognitive dissonance when I read the book Women Who Love Psychopaths. And cognitive dissonance, because these men wear two masks, they are Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or now I'm changing it to Romeo and Dirty John to make it
Oh my
more
gosh, that's so great.
because my young patients are like, "Who's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dr.
Oh
Nay?"
my,
So we're going to say Romeo and Dirty John, right? So they have you feel like you're dating two people. You feel like you're having two different relationships. So you start to think, is he good? Is he bad? Am I good? Am I bad? Is the relationship good? Is the relationship bad? And that cognitive dissonance causes a lack of executive functioning.
hmm
We can't strategize, we can't plan, we can't think straight. So that's why these realizations or aha moments just keep coming. I mean, listen, I'm out of mine 25 years. And, look how long it took me to write the book and how many aha moments, right?
Yeah, it really is profound. It's one of those things where every single episode, just talk therapy is amazing because there's so many things that I completely forgot about
Right.
that either happened, that I felt, things that are significant that a normal person or a listener is like, how could you forget about that, Amanda? And I'm like, I don't know. The trauma bond that I had with my ex-husband was like being addicted to heroin. It was one of those things that I know for certain no one can understand unless you have gone through something similar. Um, but I didn't initially treat it as that. I was really like continue every time he would abandon me or cheat or do something. What I've realized now is that it wasn't the addiction. I wasn't addicted to him. I think that I was smart enough to recognize that he was probably not the guy that I thought he was at that point. I was
Okay.
addicted to making myself not feel how horrible I felt when he would do those things.
Mhm.
So I was begging him to come back. I was, let me buy you this, let you know, kind of all of these different ways to fix the situation. Not because I
Yeah.
wanted to fix the situation. I just wanted not to feel like I wanted to
Yeah.
explode.
Well, you want relief. And I write about that where our tormentor becomes our soother,
Hmm.
right? And so they're the one causing the pain. But what happens, we isolate and we feel a lot of shame. And so we don't share and connect with other people. And they're really the only one then that comes to be able to soothe the internal pain and give us relief for the internal pain that we're feeling, like you're describing.
Yeah.
And hope is the hook. And then we're like, oh, we feel the relief because we're somewhat pseudo connected to them again. But sure enough, right, the intermittent abuse comes back, and then we're just back in that dynamic. And it's hard. It's a hard, I wrote about this that I read research that said, animal trainers that use intermittent reinforcement, meaning being extremely good and extremely bad within one relationship, if the animal trainer used that technique, the animals bonded to them 230% more than regular straight kindness.
That is
That's
profound.
when I read that, I really wanted to scream it from my roof.
Yeah.
So it just shows you how that intermittent reinforcement and the two masks, the good and the bad guy, it really bonds us to them.
I think too, also with dog training, analogies is how I got my way through law school and undergrad, and it's just one of those things that I feel like people can learn through them a lot, but I always make
Yes.
analogies. So, the whole thing, like if you swat the dog on the nose with a newspaper every time it goes to eat, eventually the dog will stop eating and it will
Right.
starve itself and die. I felt like in my relationship, every time I would voice the concern that I would be told that I was too emotional. Emotions don't get things done. Leave them at the door. We have to talk about facts and how to make more money. That really is what I was like verbatim what I was told. And so I also got like the word salad, kind of just the circle talking where then I'm smart. And I would go into this with a mission. I'd think about the conversation I wanted to have, the goal. I'd walk into the office. I'd start, and it was like I got in there and I froze. And after so many times of that being the case, I actually like developed a little bit of a stutter in like my speech pattern. I was not very talkative in social, like I was socially anxious all the time. And I think that
Mm.
it's like that. It's like I got swatted on the nose so many times that I was like, I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I work with women a lot about their voice, right? Because I think, in society and in general, we've been taught not to use our voice too much. And then you're in this sort of relationship and forget it. I mean, your voice doesn't count at all, right? Because they
Hmm.
can't hear you, they don't understand you. And what I work with my patients, and I say this to them, I want you to have a voice, not because it's going to change somebody's behavior, not even because they can listen to you, because I want you to practice having it,
Right.
right? Because if we don't practice it, as you're saying, you get out of practice, you can't do it anymore. It's like playing the piano.
Hmm. Yep. If you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing. And
So
especially
true,
if you're being punished for using it, it goes
especially
away.
if you're punished, especially if you're being punished. Well, you found your
Yeah,
voice, you got a podcast.
I did. Yeah, it was one of those things where I was very nervous to do it because it was I recognized it so much because I like to talk and I was embarrassed. I'm like, the stutter. As soon as I got through maybe like the second episode, like it was like gone. I think that
Good, good.
there is so much power that I found in, I guess, just talking about not only the things that happened to me, but also the things that I was embarrassed about that I did, the shame that I held from the relationship, the things that I allowed, because it was killing me inside because I felt like I was a prisoner. I'm like, I can't talk about this because every time I want to talk about it, I have to say something that I was completely an idiot for doing. And so I just wouldn't. And so it
Yeah.
was like it was really pausing my journey towards healing. Once I did that, once I was like, nope, if I feel embarrassed about something when I'm talking about it, that 100% is the thing I need to talk about.
Yeah. Well, shame, I feel like in general, is the number one reason why people come to therapy, even though they might not realize it. And the shame that a victim feels in a trauma bond is probably one of the hardest symptoms to treat because they feel humiliated for being in it, for staying, for how they behaved in it. Even though it's not their shame to carry, it's really the perpetrator of the abuse. But if you think about what the word shame means, the root word is skim, which means to hide.
Mhm.
So we want to hide, we don't want to be seen. But you're right, once we expose these horrible things, that we think are so horrible, and once somebody receives them, they're not as horrible as we thought. And what I work with my patients, I say, okay, the antidote to shame is self compassion. So you have to speak to yourself as you would a good friend. If a friend came and told you they got abused for 10 years and that you hadn't seen them forever and they went through this, you wouldn't say, oh, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Right.
You would say,
Exactly.
oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What do you need? How can I help? And so that really helps. There's so much research about self compassion, and I have a self compassion assessment on my website and a self compassion meditation because I believe in it so strong. This is research from Kristen Neff to really speak kindly to yourself after you've gone through something like this. I'm begging anybody who's out there listening, please speak kindly to yourself.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind for me is grace. I
Yes.
had a hard time not being using self-deprecating humor. I guess that's very much me within the podcast, and I recognize that that's probably a defense mechanism for all of the things. But I found probably in episode like 20, I was like, you know what? I have to give that version of myself grace because I know for certain that I was doing everything that I possibly could to survive at that time, and I find that trait admirable and inspiring. To be
Yeah,
able to look at yourself as a different person is very difficult.
it's
But
that's
at
why.
that moment,
Yeah, but that's why people come to therapy. It's all about shifting their perception around themselves.
mhm.
Um, but grace is a beautiful thing to give yourself, and that's why I wrote my book because I really wanted to destigmatize the victim. Stop saying why does she say stay and ask why does he do that? Right, that beautiful Lindsay Bancroft book,
Mhm.
and not that that doesn't mean that I couldn't take accountability for some things, right? Of course, I went to a clinic after my marriage. I've been in therapy for 25 years. I'm actually not in therapy right now. But, you know, so that doesn't mean that I'm perfect. I've had thousands of things to work on. Just ask my kids. Okay. But I'm willing to look at them. But that doesn't mean that I was responsible for Jordan's addiction and abuse. Two
Right.
very different things. And when you're in a trauma bond, they make you feel like you made me do this. I'll tell you a crazy story. I had a client where the husband literally took a picture of himself naked on top of another woman and took a picture of themselves then like that and said since it's her and said you made me do this.
Oh my gosh.
This is and it's in the book. This is the extreme level that these people will go to blame us for their bad behavior.
It's so manipulative and just all of the things. Cruel, like, oh. But
Yeah,
not
no,
surprising, not surprising though at
right.
all.
Right. And so, yes, we can take accountability for ourselves, but we are never responsible for someone else's abuse ever. Abuse is always the fault of the abuser. And that's why in my book, I write a lot about, let's get rid of these labels, love addict and learn helplessness and even codependency, which everybody told me I was.
Hmm.
Um, because that doesn't mean there aren't strands for us to look at in there, but those labels are not empowering us.
Yeah, right. What are we doing with being a love addict? Like,
Right. Oh, okay. No, actually, humans are wired for connection. We're
right.
meant to love,
Yes.
right? So you can see I get passionate about that.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. Same.
Yeah, because that's so disempowering. I was on a phone call once with a divorce coach with my patient, the divorce coach and the divorce attorney, and she said to my patient, learned helplessness. I said, "Did you just tell my patient she has learned helplessness?"
Oh
We
my
got into a
God.
fight on the screen.
I couldn't even imagine. I mean, I know
She
what
was
you're saying because I've had people say, I think that I think that there are people, there's so much going on in this space right now on social
yes,
media that
yes,
it's very like polarizing because you have people who almost feel like they have a PhD in
right,
psychology because they watch TikToks or whatever.
right,
And that's okay. That's good that they're learning. That's really great that they're learning.
right.
But then you also have the other side of the spectrum of people who are like, I don't I don't need to know all of that, but that it's like blissful ignorance almost. Those are the people who use the terms to me, love addict. Well, you're
Yeah,
codependent, Amanda. You're codependent.
right.
You need to, like, and I'm like, you realize that that does not make me feel good. But I don't think they know, like
They don't know. And there's actually more research from this wonderful man, Dr. Robert Weiss, and he actually goes up against the codependent thing and calls, he has came up with a whole term called prodependence. And
oh,
and it's really a nice term. And what he says is that people that love people that are in addiction, um, they're just loving them and they're just trying to help people. And we have to stop pathologizing the partner that's trying to help the other person. Now that's very different than, abuse and a trauma bond, right?
mhm.
But if anybody wants to check him out, it's a great book. I just read it and I really loved it.
Yeah, you'll have to send me. You mentioned like three books. I want to put
I
them
know
in
I have
the.
so many that I rattle
Yeah,
off.
that's
I'll
fantastic. I collect books. I should read
okay.
all of them, but whenever I see a good one, I'm like, okay, I gotta get it. And then it'll sit in the shelf. I'll eventually get to it. Um, yeah, it is amazing how much this space has grown.
Yes.
It's amazing how you sharing, me sharing, Vanessa, like everybody, were empowering other women to be able to find their voice just by
Yes,
healing ourselves, which I think is seriously just the coolest thing ever. Like
it
how
is.
who would have thought? Like who would have thought that the thing that I needed to do, that what I needed, because when I got out of the relationship, I was like, who am I? What do I want to be when I grow up? And I was
Right.
a full human successful before. And I was like 32, 32, 33 when I got out of the relationship. And I'm like, I don't know who I am right now.
Yeah. Well, loss of self is a huge symptom from a trauma
Yes.
bond because they have to strip you of the sense of self to control you. But I think you bring up a really good point, and I want to illuminate that is that recovery is possible,
Yes.
right? Post traumatic growth is real. We do recover. And actually, the research shows people that experience this sort of trauma, intimate partner violence, I'm just going to call it, or a trauma bond, 75% of them go on to experience post traumatic growth. That's
That's a
really
great
hopeful.
statistic.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a good number.
it's a good
Absolutely.
number. So, like get in there, do the work, reach out, listen to podcasts, educate yourself, don't isolate, get yourself a good therapist, right?
I think too, it's also important to note that not like two people are going to heal in the same way. How I'm choosing to do it is, I mean, you could ask my mother, you could ask my therapist. When I said that I wanted to do a podcast, they were like, "Are you out of your mind, girlfriend?" Like, no, no, don't do that. And I'm like, "No, but I feel like I have to. Like, I think that this is what I have to do, and I feel like I need to trust my gut so that I remember what it feels like to trust your gut, you know?"
Yeah,
And then I
yes,
did it,
same,
and
yeah.
everybody across the board that was like, no, don't do it. They're like, wow, she really knew. She really knew what she needed. And so a lot of people will send me messages, as I'm sure you get a lot of messages. Um, and it's like, you're inspiring me. Maybe I should do a podcast. Maybe I should hear, kind of like following like what I'm doing as a guideline. And I really want to emphasize it's not for everybody. And your timing on healing is your timing. You have to pick it. It has to be like I can't inspire or bully you or anything into healing right now at this moment. It just won't work because your heart won't be in it. Just same way as like the narcissist isn't gonna go and get therapy to be better because they don't want to at that moment.
That's right. That's
So
right. And healing is the progress is in the process. It's a process, and like you said, people do it in their own way, in their own time. Um, and I've sat with women for years, just like my therapist sat with me for years before I was ready to leave, and that's okay.
yeah,
And that's okay. There's no judgment when you're, unless of course they're unsafe, then it's
yeah,
a different story. Then we have to take certain measures, but you know what? It's okay. You have to do it at your own pace. And then one day you have a last straw, as I call it, and you're out. But I always say, once you do leave, don't ever let them see you coming. You have to
yeah.
then you have to wear the mask, and you have to plan behind the scenes your exit. And I write about that. I forget, I think it's chapter 7.
It's crazy because I would say, well, the last two of his exes that I interviewed on the podcast, Savannah and Amory, they're very different person. We're all like very similar, all of the girls. We have a lot of the same personality traits. We're probably, like you mentioned, like the big five or like
Mhm.
high agreeableness, conscientiousness, like all of these things. Um, the last two left him. He left the others before them, and then
Okay.
he left me.
Okay.
And
So a discarder too.
yes, so he was somebody who when he had, for the lack of a better term, like sucked you dry of everything, your empathy, your finances, your willingness to lift them up,
Yeah.
everything. Then he's like, all right, I'm just gonna throw you away. And he did that with me so many times over and over. So talk about this rapid cycling of, love bombing, coming back, because it was every time I would realize he had abandoned me. It was like within an hour or 2 hours that he would reach out and be like, I'm so sorry I left and I love you and I'm going to be back. He would make himself like the knight in shining armor. Things are not good at home for us. So I'm going here so I can make some money and bring it back and save the
Mm,
day. He turned
right.
his abandonment into this noble cause. And I'm like, you, sir. Because I'm at home shaking, throwing up, can't work, like on short-term disability. And he's like, and then I'm supposed to be thankful to him.
Right, right. And that's what they do. They go from Karpman triangle, they go from rescuer, perpetrator to victim,
Oh,
right? Which is another reason why we're so confused.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not easy to be in a relationship with somebody like that. Not easy.
Yeah, I mean, not easy as putting it as light as possible. It felt like the absolute end of the world. And again, like I never ever do comparing stories whose situation was worse, because I know for certain when you were going through what you went with Jordan, right? That was your World War III, right? And this was mine, and they were all different, but all equally as intense to
That's right.
us personally. Um, One of the things that is different about our stories is there's so many similarities. So the ankle bracelet thing, my ex-husband is a felon. He was on house arrest. Um, he actually went to your ex-husband's seminar, which I think is
I'm sure he
so,
did.
oh my gosh, so crazy. One of the first things that on one of our first dates, he was like, and I love Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, he's like a hero to me. And Yeah, I even paid to go to a seminar and he's amazing. I remember him saying this. That's why when I bumped into you, I was like, oh my gosh, she has a story. No way. So,
Yeah,
and then the money and the drugs and just grandiose scam as
yeah,
well. Like that
yeah.
that deceptive nature is 100% what he does as a profession. Um, the difference is, and I can't speak to this, is having children within this type of relationship. Like being in the relationship, because I don't have children, and after, because what I hear a lot of times and what a lot of people, my listeners talk about is, like the children being used, weaponized and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that, like navigating that?
Sure, sure. So, I always say to my patients, I was really lucky that my ex got arrested because one of the other conditions that needs to be apparent for a trauma bond to exist is a power imbalance. And he had all the power, he had all the resources, he had the all the power because he dominated me and controlled me, right? And just
Right.
the very fact that I loved him, he had power over me. But once he got arrested, the power dynamic shifted and we became equals. And so once that happened, and that is why I left him at that moment, I knew he couldn't harm me anymore. And so with the kids, I was very lucky because he was so focused on dealing with the FBI and all the other shit that he was dealing with.
Hmm.
He really left the raising of the kids to me. And we didn't have that situation that so many people have after a trauma bond with navigating the children. But I do believe it's because his all of his power was taken from him.
Yeah, I mean,
And
because you said he's a great dad, and
yeah,
that's
he
something that
is.
you don't hear every day from an ex-wife
No,
of somebody who went through this.
no. I mean, that doesn't mean along the way we didn't have our arguments because we're both two strong minded people. We certainly have. But I would say overall, in general, I was very lucky in that way. And my kids are amazing. My daughter's a therapist. They're well adjusted. My son's a musician. And actually, he's here today. Um, yeah, that was one thing that actually went very well. Thank you, Lord, because I work with so many women where it doesn't.
Yeah.
And and it's a real problem. But I think getting arrested took his power away.
Well, thank goodness for that.
Thank
You were
goodness for
you were
that.
able to plan your escape. So, how about meeting your your current husband and
Yeah.
what that was like after being in this type of relationship? Like two-prong question. Definitely talk about that. And you do, and how wonderful your husband is. But also, I want to know, was there ever a moment when you were exploring new relationships that you got kind of this question? why why do you keep talking about it? Stop living in the past, like
Yeah. Yeah.
from potential partners or something like that, because I feel like I'm getting that, and I know a lot of people who are sharing their story.
People say that. People say that to me all the time on Instagram, and I crack up. They're
Yeah, I'm
like,
like,
get over it already, stop talking about him. And I was like, sorry, I'm doing whatever I want, but thank
it's
you.
just my life, sorry I lived it.
Yeah. But even so, I didn't get that as much when I was dating. People didn't say, when I started to meet new people, they didn't say it to me as much. I don't remember that being a piece of my story, that it happened to me. And I was in therapy at the time, so I did spend a lot of time with my therapist talking about him. And so I don't remember people saying that. But my current husband, I met him on a blind date, and I remember being deathly afraid to trust. Like I was like, can I trust you? I can't trust you. I can't trust you. And he would be like, you could trust me. You could trust me. I'd be like, no, I can't. And there was a real, real battle with that about trusting. And I always joke about this. The first time we had our first argument, because it happens, and I said to him, this is how I feel. This is what I need, blah, blah. He was like, oh, I hear that. I was like, what?
Yeah, you're like,
Wait,
I've never heard that before. Like,
you hear me? So, yeah, now we've been together 25 years.
amazing.
And we have 5 kids between us, none together, but and we've raised them, and we have two grandkids. And he's, like he says, he's my secretary now.
That's so fantastic.
That's sweet.
I think that the right partner is the one that gives you the space to
Yes.
grow in the way that you know you need to and supports you. And
Yeah.
constructive criticism, is always going to be there and things like that, but does it in a way that's not like degrading and takes away
Yes.
like what you should know for yourself,
That's right.
right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, no. Like last night, I did a big presentation. He was like, maybe next time do this. He was like, it was great. And I was like, yeah, I hear that. Right. Like it's just a normal exchange.
Yeah,
And that's just so easy and it's drama free. And having a drama free life allows me to excel in my professional life.
absolutely.
Because if
I
I
think
fighting with my husband all the time, I couldn't do this.
right, because you'd be exhausted mentally, emotionally, like all of these things. And I think that's a really good point. I have a girlfriend who same thing, kind of went through a very similar relationship and she's out of it. And she said something so like self-aware the other day. She said, I think that I'm addicted to like the chaos, that when I'm meeting these people, um, that aren't, this person, I'm like, they're so boring. They're so boring.
That people have said that to me.
And I'm
And then
like,
now realize boring is great.
boring is so good because boring is like a safe space. There is no yell. So it's it's all a lifelong learning lesson. I have accepted now that I don't think that there's ever going to be a point in time where my therapist like gives me a cap and gown and she's like, "You're done. You've graduated, like you made it." Um,
That's right.
we're always going to be evolving, and it's so important that we evolve and we find our purpose. And I think that people don't know that like your purpose is actually on the other side of your pain a lot of the time.
A lot of the time. And I'm committed to reinvention.
Yes.
I'm just committed to reinventing myself over and over again. And I think that's an important thing to do. And it is possible. And especially after you've been in a trauma bond, I know it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, but it's there. Keep going.
Keep going, right? Well, for the sake of time, I tell everyone where they can get your book.
Sure.
And
Yes.
then also I will share all of your social links and we'll put some of those books you mentioned in the bio and everything.
Yeah, so you can find me at drnae.com, NAE, and there you can get my book, you can get it on Amazon, and please, I have tons of free assessments, tons of free worksheets, tons of free meditations, use them, you know? And then Instagram is the real Dr. Nadine, and I answer all my own direct messages because I love connecting with people. And TikTok, the wild world, the wild west of social media, is Dr. NAE LMFT. And this has been lovely. Thank you so much for having me on, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you so much. Next time I am, are you in New York now? Are you
I
in
am.
Cal? You
I
are.
am. I'm
You're
in,
in New York. Okay.
yeah, where
Next
are
time
you?
I'm there, I was telling Vanessa, I'm like, you know what? We all
Come
got to get
visit
together,
us.
have some drinks, just do something. I
Yes, come
appreciate it.
visit us. We would love
Thank
it.
you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.